Hi, everyone. We are starting now the webinar promoted by Eroles Advogados in a joint initiative with ABTOKEN, named Digital Assets Around Latin America. My name is Pedro Eroles. I'm the founding partner of Eroles Advogados, and here with me is Regina Pedroso, founder and director of ABTOKEN. Today, we will host some of the most renowned specialists around Latin America on digital assets. So before we present them, I will hand over to Regina so as she can speak a little bit about the role of ABTOKEN in Brazil.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you, Pedro, and all the specialists here at a special moment in the market where we are building the global regulatory scenario with numerous challenges. I will make a brief presentation of ABTOKEN, the Brazilian Association of Tokenizing Companies and Blockchain ones, inviting everyone to be close. I'm very happy to share with you experts in Latin America. Well, ABTOKEN, the Brazilian Association of Tokenizing and Blockchain Companies, organization dedicated to fostering the growing tokenization sector in Brazil. The founder of ABTOKEN marks a significant step towards the modernization of the Brazilian financial market through blockchain technology and asset tokenization. We also foster the other tokenization models in Brazil and globally. We like to create an ecosystem where tokenization is widely recognized and used as a powerful tool for innovation and democratizing access to assets and promoting a more inclusive and efficient economy. Develop also and spread the adoption of tokenizing in Brazil and in other countries. That's why it's so important moments like that we share the experience in Latin America and other countries. We also believe in the importance of education and the public and stakeholders about the benefits and use of tokenization, collaborating with regulators around the world and to create a favorable regulatory environment and safe, mainly, promoting innovation and the best practice in the sector. So ABTOKEN is recently founded in this year, but we have the main goal to fill the gap of institutional leadership in Brazil. It's very important agendas like institutional ones, and my invitation at this moment is stay close to ABTOKEN and enjoy this such important event and discussion made by Eroles Advogados. Pedro, again, such a pleasure to be with you and this expertise in this afternoon. I wish a widely and a better collaboration this afternoon with share of knowledge. And I'm so grateful in the name of ABTOKEN. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Regina. And just to make a presentation of our panelists today, as I mentioned, we have some of the most renowned specialists in digital assets in some jurisdictions of Latin America, some of them of the most renowned law firms in Latin America. So making a brief presentation, we have today with us Daniel Levi from Beccar Varela in Argentina. We have Fabio Araujo from the Brazilian regulator, the Central Bank of Brazil, Josefina Recalde from ACR Legal in Chile, Juan Carlos Ollivier from Creel in Mexico, and Jorge Sánchez from Brigard Urrutia in Colombia. So, such a pleasure and such an honor to have you all here with us today. We are very grateful that you are here today with us to share your knowledge and expertise on the matter in this event. We also like to thank all our audience today and say that everyone that's watching us are free to ask questions. So after the presentation of our panelists today, we'll have a Q&A. So feel free to send your questions so as our panelists can answer them at the end of our webinar. So, and feel free to ask the questions in Portuguese, Spanish, or English, as you prefer. So to start our webinar, I'd like to give the floor to Danielle Levi from Beccar Varela. So Danielle, just to ask you to please provide us a brief overview of the regulatory landscape of digital assets in Argentina. Thank you very much.
Sure, Pedro. Thanks for your introduction, and also thank you and ABTOKEN for the invitation to this webinar. It is a pleasure to share it with all these distinguished colleagues. Okay, let me give you a very brief background about where we stand in Argentina with regulations regarding virtual assets and the provision of digital services with crypto. Just for you to know, according to recent global surveys, Argentina is right now within the first 15 countries with the highest adoption of crypto. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of things going on here, debates, new regulations, innovations. So there are a lot of things to comment. But if I have to say what happened in Argentina before this year, before 2024, I would say that before this year, the crypto sector was quite unregulated. We just had certain isolated rules for AML, some things for taxes, and the certain statements by the central bank and the Securities Commission, issuing warnings around crypto activities or activities with virtual assets, but it was not, a sector with a lot of regulations. On March this year, our Federal Congress approved for the first time a legislation that introduced the first legal framework for the provision of services with virtual assets in our country. The context in which this legislation was approved was because Argentina was being under an audit process by the FATF, which is the International Organization for AML recommendations. The FATF put a lot of pressure to Argentina for it to adopt a regulation for services with virtual assets, because otherwise the country could be put in a gray list. So that's why, on a very urgent timing, our Federal Congress, by the beginning of this year, on March, approved this new law, which is Law 27739. And the interesting aspect of this is that this law actually introduced a reform to our AML regime. It was not a specific law for virtual assets. It was actually a law for an AML reform. And it introduced for the first time the activity of providers of services with virtual assets as obligated subjects for compliance with AML rules in our country. But not only that, it also empowered, this new law empowered our Securities Commission to establish a registry for this activity, and also to regulate the substantial activity and impose prudential requirements, consumer protection rules, and other regulations for the activity in the future. This law brings two different definitions for virtual assets and for providers of services with virtual assets. These definitions are identical to the ones that are recommended by the FATF internationally. Virtual assets are defined as digital representations of value that can be used for payments or investments, and the activities that are categorized for the provision of services with virtual assets under this regime are the 5 categories that are also recommended to be defined by the FATF, which is the activity of exchange of fiat with virtual assets, the swap between 2 different virtual assets, the transfer of virtual assets, the custody of virtual assets, or the performance of financial services around the offering of a virtual asset. In addition, as I said, this new law established 2 registration requirements for service providers. The first one must be obtained from the Securities Commission, and this is an interesting particularity of our regime. In Argentina, this law decided that the authority that should supervise the activity is the Securities Commission, not the central bank. Not because virtual assets are considered securities. This is not the same regime as securities. This is a different regime specific for virtual assets, but the Securities Commission is the authority designed to supervise the sector. So first, there is this registration requirement with the Securities Commission, and afterwards, a second registration must be obtained with the Financial Information Unit for AML purposes. In a first stage, these registrations are only intended to be obtained for AML purposes, but now there is a public consultation of an enhancement of this regime for imposing additional rules now, yes, for the substantial activity regarding prudential requirements, transparency requirements, reporting, and other additional obligations. But at this first stage, what we have for now is just these 2 registration requirements only for AML purposes. As of today, we have almost 100 players registered. So you can realize that in a very short term, the authorities got a very high level of acceptance, and not only by local players, but also by foreign players, because this regime not only captures local players, but also foreign players that are deemed to be doing business towards Argentina. In the case of foreign players, they have to meet certain elements of territoriality in the country for them to be required to register in Argentina. These elements, are connected with the type of advertising that these players perform, and how they target residents in Argentina, and the business volume that they have with Argentine residents. But also what explains that almost 100 players are already registered in the country as providers of services with virtual assets is that this registration process for this first stage is very, very simple. It's rather formal, and the authorities wanted first to prioritize that players register and not to put a very burdensome process for the registration. So, for instance, foreign players don't need to have a local presence, they don't need to apostille documents, they don't need to have a local tax ID. So, as you can see, it's a very simplified regime at this first stage. In a second stage, which is the one that is being under public consultation right now, this regime will be enhanced. Local presence will be required. Minimum net worth amounts will be required. And a lot of transparency rules and, cybersecurity measures, reporting obligations, another type of obligations for the substantial activity will be imposed. So a lot of players are in a hurry trying to enter in the first stage of the registration and not to fall in the second stage when the regime will be enhanced. We expect that by the beginning of next year, this public consultation will be finally approved. And even with this new regime, we have two important prohibitions in the country still for banks and for payment service providers that offer payment accounts. These two players, they still are prohibited for offering services with virtual assets on the front end. Of course, they can provide infrastructure or back-end fiat services, but these two sectors, banks and e-wallets, are still prohibited for these activities in the country. So that's a very brief landscape of where we are in Argentina. Hopefully, something similar is happening in the other countries.
Thank you very much, Daniel. This is very interesting. You know that in Brazil, and maybe Fabio will talk a little bit about that. We are in the course of public consultation on virtual assets service providers. But I think one of the most interesting aspects, and this is very, it's a coincidence because we received a question from the WhatsApp about the dispute that happens in some jurisdictions between the financial regulator and the securities regulator. And you mentioned that in Argentina, the regulator of crypto, if I understood correctly, is the securities regulator, regardless if it's a security or not. This is very interesting because in Brazil, and I will not expand on that because, of course, Fabio will talk with much more knowledge than me about the Brazilian aspects, but we have, as of course, there are still some controversial aspects, but we have, in a certain sense, jurisdictions very well defined between the center, what will be the jurisdiction of the central bank, and what will be the jurisdiction of the Brazilian Securities and Exchange Commission, which would be the jurisdiction over securities. But this is very interesting. We can get back to this aspect at the end of our webinar, but thank you very much for this very complete overview. And to continue our webinar, I will give the floor to our distinguished guest, Fabio Araujo from the Central Bank of Brazil. So please, Fabio, could you please provide us a brief overview of the regulatory landscape of digital assets in Brazil? Thank you very much.
Sure, Pedro. Thank you, Pedro and Regina, for the invitation. There is a lot going on in Brazil regarding the regulatory framework of digital assets. And when I talk about digital assets, I'm not going to focus myself only on crypto. I will be talking about all different sorts of digital assets, crypto, real-world assets in the other extreme, and right in the middle of these two extremes, the tokenization of money. We're working here in Brazil in this space to try to create a complete platform for tokenization for digital assets in Brazil. Let's get started by talking a little bit about crypto. Crypto in Brazil is a very popular way for the people to invest. In a study of this year, the Association of Capital Markets here in Brazil noticed that crypto is the third kind of asset that is most used by the population. It is ahead of stock markets, government bonds, and other corporate debts. Then it is a very widespread way of saving here in Brazil. And maybe that's because here we are going very easy in terms of the operation of that. We have some non-bank PSPs that provide crypto services. We have large banks providing crypto services, apart from the exchanges, the global exchanges and local exchanges that are working in this space. And with all of this movement in the market, we've been trying to regulate it and to give the population the security that's necessary for the transactions. In 2023, the Central Bank of Brazil was appointed as the regulatory entity of virtual asset service providers, and that's very interesting compared to what was said before. As Pedro was saying, there was this discussion between who in the government who should be holding this regulatory power, the central bank or the Security Exchange Committee. The government here decided that the central bank was better equipped to do that. And another difference that I noticed in comparison to what Argentina, the path that Argentina took, is that we defined virtual assets in general as an exclusion of what we already know how to regulate. Instead of saying virtual assets is this, we say virtual asset is not fiat money, tokenized, or any other assets that we know already how to deal, that was tokenized or anything else. Then whatever we know how to regulate already keeps the same competences. That's why we have a regulatory framework where all the competences are very well defined. If it was a security, it belongs into the regulatory perimeter of the CVM, our Security Exchange Committee. If you tokenize it, it continues to be a security. Then it doesn't come to the regulatory perimeter of the Central Bank of Brazil, and so on and so forth. Each asset has its nature, and it's not because it is tokenized that it becomes a virtual asset. The virtual asset is something new that we don't know yet how to deal, and that's why we need another regulatory power and another way to incorporate these businesses into the regulated framework and bring the service to the population. Along 2024, we've been working on the regulatory framework of virtual asset service providers. We ran earlier this year a consultation that was an open consultation asking to the stakeholders general questions regarding the principles and what were to test what were the interests of the markets and how they saw specific aspects of the market here in Brazil. And that was very interesting because we could use this feedback to issue now another consultation based on these ideas to discuss with the society. Some of the aspects that are very important for us that are there is that the custody. We have three different activities that are broadly discussed there. In each of these activities, there are several different sub-activities that can be done. We have the intermediation activity, the custody activity, and the exchange activity. You can have an authorization for any of these three activities, and you have a row of services that you can provide inside under any of these labels. And when you talk about custody for someone that is looking into regulated frameworks, we see a clear distinction between what can be done in a public space, where the custody of the key and the custody of the asset is pretty much the same thing, compared to a permission space where the custody of the key and the custody of the asset can be separated services, and you can have different responsibilities regarding each of them. And apart from that, the separation of capital, the discrimination of capital between what belongs to each person and to the exchange, that's something that's very important, and it is there in the public consultation. Then we are with this period open for getting feedbacks. If you are interested, you should take a look into our regulation and give your opinions on how we should regulate the market. It is a very good opportunity for doing that. And moving to real world assets, we are also discussing that with the SEC here in Brazil, the CVM, and they are working together with us so we can come up with this new regulatory framework where we can, instead of just bringing the representation of assets into a digital space, we can make these assets to be born in a digital framework and to have their entire lives into this space. These could be very good for efficiency and for reducing costs, but we understand that there's a lot of work to be done. We are talking to other regulatory agencies here in Brazil, so we can incorporate other assets as real estate or vehicles. We are running tests on what can be done using this technology, and as the base of all this testing, we see that the currency is a very important cornerstone of the framework, and all of these discussions are being done under the framework of the development of a CBDC and a regulation of stable coins and tokenized deposits or tokenized money here in Brazil. I will stop here so we can discuss a little more later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabio. This is very interesting, and this is aligned with what Regina has talked in the beginning of the webinar, how our regulation is being built. We have a lot to be done yet. we are in the course of a public consultation on the authorization of VISPs. We had the announcement recently about a new public consultation on the use of crypto assets for FX in Brazil. And there's a lot to be seen in the country yet. So this is very interesting. Thank you very much for this very complete overview of the Brazilian regulatory landscape. So to continue our webinar, I will give the floor to Josefina Recalde from ACR Legal in Chile. So, Josefina, thank you very much for your participation. And please, can you please provide us an overview of the regulatory landscape in your country, in Chile? Thank you very much.
Hi, so thank you very much, Pedro and Regina, for having me here. I'm very excited to share with my colleagues. I will share a short presentation with you, so just let me know if you can see it. So basically, starting off, the regulatory landscape in Chile regarding digital assets is set forth mainly in the law, which is called the FinTech law number 21,521, which was issued in January of 2023. This law regulates certain services that are qualified within as FinTech services, within some of them, including crypto assets. It also regulates other financial aspects, including open finance and open banking, and incorporates certain amendments to other laws. For example, certain amendments to laws on anti-money laundering and financing of terrorism. And the second norm that would regulate digital assets in Chile corresponds to a secondary regulation that was issued by the Financial Market Commission, which would be General Rule number 502, which regulates certain aspects for the registration and authorization of operation for certain service providers. The FinTech law establishes crypto assets or digital assets according to different parameters. On the first hand, it defines digital assets or crypto assets on the same way that is internationally recognized, just as it is in Argentina, of digital representations of value or goods or services, with the specification that it's other than money. So units of value, goods or services other than money. On the other hand, any digital assets which are backed by money, as are stablecoins, are recognized as a means of payment, but are not comprehended within the definition of virtual financial assets. And this differentiation is quite important because of the jurisdiction of the authorities that in which they fall, right? So virtual assets or crypto assets fall within the jurisdiction of the Financial Market Committee or the CMF, whereas digital assets, stablecoins, fall within the jurisdiction of the central bank. And that has quite a few implications to the treatment that is given to either by the law. Now, regarding the virtual assets, crypto assets, FinTech law establishes quite a few services which can be provided based on crypto assets. We include alternative transaction systems, which are basically exchanges, investment advisory services. This could be from an advisory finance institution to a finance influencer who complies with certain parameters, custody of financial instruments, order routing and intermediation of financial instruments, including crypto assets. Now, there's quite a few aspects that are important for the provision of services in Chile, and it's very important to note that the qualification of provision or rendering of services in Chile is the triggering aspect to determine whether an entity falls within the regulation or not, aside from the specific service that they are providing, right? So in particularly, the fintech law as well as the secondary regulations have understood that the rendering of services in Chile implies the material performance of such services in their country, whether by physical or electronic means, as well as implying any forms of communication to target residents in Chile. Additionally, the CMF, though non-bindingly, has issued opinions stating that the opening of bank accounts in Chile, the targeting by electronic means, that is Google ads, which are made available to Chilean residents, or even advertising, just normal advertising physically in the streets or any other way, could be understood as establishing a local presence in Chile. So depending on the case and the usage of that means, a certain entity could be understood to be governed by fintech law. Now, the important requirements for fintech laws, understanding that they fall within these territorial criteria, is that any services providers which fall within this scope have to register before the Financial Commission in this new registry that is created called the Registry for Financial Service Providers, as well as obtaining an authorization to operate within Chile. So these are two different requirements that are met. Firstly, you have to request for the registration, and secondly, you have to obtain the authorization to operate. And even the terms that are established for each, for the CMF to review your application for each one of the categories, are different. Additionally, it's very important that foreign entities who are intending to register in this registry for finance service so they can provide services regarding crypto in Chile have to establish either a local entity, so incorporating a local entity pursuant to Chilean law, or set up a branch of their foreign company in Chile. This is very important because the law itself requires entities to have a registered address in Chile for them to operate as well. But the important thing regarding this aspect right now is that the law itself establishes a transitional period, which allows for entities to apply for registration no later than February 3rd of 2025, and they can continue their operations until their application is reviewed. So therefore, the entities which are intending to provide services or that are currently providing services can continue to perform their operations until they are reviewed and their application is either approved or effectively denied. And additionally to the requirements for registration and authorization, the fintech law, as well as Rule 502, establishes the framework for corporate governance and risk management according to specifications for each service. So every single service, as well as the different aspects of it, are regulated. There is a system established whereby there are blocks or modules relating to the scale of operation of each entity or the volume of the business in consideration to clients or the amount of transactions operated per month, as well as the amount of the value of transactions per month, per year, different parameters established, whereby there is a proportional distribution of the regulation that is applicable to each of the entities pursuant to these categories. And additionally, the fintech law modifies anti-money laundering laws in Chile, so that any entity that is registered before the CMF and in that sense is qualified as a fintech provider or fintech service provider is also considered as a reporting entity before the financial analysis unit. So they have to register before this unit and they have to comply with a certain reporting obligations of suspicious activity, as well as providing certain information regarding transactions over a certain amount of money and additional requirements for declarations of responsibility, procedures for ultimate beneficial ultimate beneficial shareholders or owners, as well as KYC for clients and different procedures within an organization. And lastly, we could touch on the tax aspect of cryptocurrency. Though there are no specific laws regarding crypto or digital assets in Chile, it has been understood by the IRS in Chile that crypto transactions, be it buying or sale operations, are subject to taxation due to the profits that are generated by them, specifically under the laws that regulate any profit for natural persons or legal entities. And additionally, given that the services for providing crypto are regulated, they may be subject to VAT, so value-added tax may be applicable to commissions or fees, for example, for intermediaries of crypto assets or exchanges, or essentially any entity that provides services relating to crypto or digital assets themselves. I guess that's an overview.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Josefina. This is very interesting because hearing you all so far seems to be, of course, we have the peculiarities, as Danielle mentioned, the securities regulator being the regulator of crypto in Argentina. But I think in the most relevant aspects, the jurisdictions are very much aligned in the main aspects of what should be targeted with respect to the regulation of crypto assets. So this is very interesting because we are talking about different jurisdictions with different peculiarities, but there is a sort of alignment with the main aspects of the regulation. So this is very interesting. Thank you very much, Josefina, for this very complete overview of the regulation in Chile. So moving forward with our event, I will give the floor to Jorge Padilla from Brigard Urrutia in Colombia. So thank you very much, Jorge. Please feel free to elaborate on the regulatory landscape of digital assets in Colombia. Thank you very much.
Pedro, and thank you all, and thank you, Eroles Abogados, for this invite. I'm really excited to be here, and I will be providing you with an overview of the regulation applicable to cryptocurrencies in Colombia. So before we start, I would like to give you some little context about how crypto transactions have been working in Colombia in the past few years. So in 2023, monthly crypto transactions in Colombia reached up to $200 million, positioning Colombia as the third country in Latin America and the 32nd in worldwide adoption of crypto assets. 55% of them use crypto not just for investment purposes, but also to save or to protect themselves against inflation and devaluation of fiat currencies, and also to avoid transaction costs in international operations. So this is something that reflects the importance of these markets, not just worldwide, but especially in Colombia, for two reasons. First, for the number and volume of transactions, and second, for the wide range of uses that are given to this type of assets. So, how are crypto assets being used in Colombia? They're being used mainly for three reasons. First, they're being used as an investment vehicle. So many Colombian residents have adopted cryptocurrencies or crypto assets as a way to diversify their portfolios and, as I was telling you, to protect them against inflation and devaluation of local currency. Second, they have been used as a means of payment for goods and services. It's still something that is not very common or usual, but some companies and businesses are starting to accept this type of digital assets or crypto assets as a form of payment, which may facilitate any borderless transaction. And third, they have been using international trade. So a lot of Colombian residents have been using cryptocurrencies or crypto assets to make purchases abroad or send remittances to other, for instance, family members in other countries. This helps them to lower transaction fees and the speed of any transfer. So given this context, how are cryptocurrencies regulated in Colombia? So the first thing that we need to say about this is that Colombia does not have a specific law or regulation that expressly regulates or defines any crypto asset or virtual asset in Colombia. This has a lot of consequences. So first, any local or any foreign company that intends to offer any type of services related to crypto assets or offer any type of crypto exchange services to Colombian residents, first, they only need to comply with general principles and obligations of the Colombian regulation, not as any specific crypto asset regulation, because there is none. Second, companies that actually offer to Colombian residents crypto assets or crypto asset services do not need to obtain any type of license, approval, or registration before any Colombian authority, just mainly for the reason of offering their crypto asset services. However, if what these companies intend to offer Colombian residents or what they intend to do is to promote or offer crypto assets from abroad, and these crypto assets are considered as securities in the jurisdiction where the company is located, then that type of service does trigger some regulatory requirements. If that would be the case, they would need to incorporate themselves before the Colombian Superintendence of Finance, which is the Colombian equivalent of the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, but in Colombia. They will need to incorporate a representative office, a rep office, in order to promote or market such crypto assets as they are considered to be securities under the law of incorporation of the company that is abroad. So, even though there is no express regulation regarding crypto assets, there have been some opinions issued by several authorities in Colombia. So, the Colombian Central Bank, the Colombian Tax Authority, the Superintendence of Finance, the Superintendence of Corporations, and a couple of more authorities have issued several opinions during the last years, based on which the following conclusions can be provided regarding crypto assets. First, they're considered as intangible or digital assets by Colombian authorities, except if they are used to illegally offer securities or regulated financial services. Second, they are not considered legal tender or foreign currency, so they are not considered to be fiat. They are not considered to be a financial investment or securities under the Colombian stock market regime. And there is no obligation in Colombia for a Colombian resident to accept crypto asset as a means of payment, since they are not considered to be legal tender. This allows any Colombian resident to purchase, custody, and even sell crypto assets as they deem appropriate, provided that Colombian residents comply with certain obligations. First, that they don't use these crypto assets to perform any illegal activities or to perform money laundering operations. Second, they need to correctly register such crypto assets in their accounting books. Since they are intangible assets, they should be registered in their accounting books. Third, they need to pay the relevant applicable taxes associated with crypto assets. And fourth, cross-border transactions performed by using crypto assets, they need to be reported to Colombian Central Bank. For instance, and just to explain a type of use in Colombia regarding crypto assets. So there have been a lot of participants who have been willing to offer cryptocurrency or crypto asset wallets or digital wallets in Colombia. So cryptocurrency wallets or digital wallets that do not offer or that do not custody fiat currency or the Colombian peso, they are not deemed to be a financial product. So the offering of a cryptocurrency or crypto asset wallet in Colombia would not be deemed a financial product, and therefore they could be perfectly offered in Colombia without any registration, without any authorization or prior authorization by the Colombian SEC or the Superintendence of Finance. So, as I was telling you, there's no express regulation. There are some opinions by some authorities, and even though there's no regulation, we have been shifting from a prior restrictive and conservative position or approach regarding crypto assets to a more progressive approach that has actually been opening up the local market and allowing more customers to operate with crypto assets with a safer ground or a simpler ground. However, and this is something that is very important, the Colombian SEC, the Colombian Superintendence of Finance, has stated that financial institutions, that being financing companies, financial corporations, banking establishments, they are not authorized to custody, invest, or intermediate, or even allow the use of crypto assets in any operation. So this has become a little bit of a hurdle in Colombia because local financial institutions have been a little bit reluctant to onboard or open bank accounts to crypto exchanges or other virtual asset service providers. However, and what has been taking place this year is that as of the date hereof, the private sector, the Colombian Superintendence of Finance, and the Colombian Ministry of Finance, they have all been, and the Colombian Central Bank as well, they have all informally agreed on the first version of what would be a crypto bill of law, or at least on the following principles that would guide this bill of law. We are still waiting on this bill of law to be enacted or be issued. However, what we have informally been gaining information about is the following principles. So first, the bill of law would establish that any company that wants to offer services related with crypto assets would need to obtain a prior registration before the SFC or the Colombian Superintendence of Finance. Second, that such companies would need to have to maintain certain minimums of capital or certain capital requirements. Third, they will need to have some reporting obligations before the central bank, the Colombian tax authority, and the Colombian AML authority. And finally, what the bill of regulation or the proposed bill of regulation will establish is that such companies that want to enter into the crypto asset services or transactions would not be considered as financial institutions. And therefore, as they are not considered as financial institutions, they will not be able to offer any financial services or products, nor use crypto assets to hide any legal offering of financial services through crypto assets. So that is generally the landscape. And what we have also been viewing in the market is that there have been like 2 or 3 things that any entity that wants to offer crypto assets should consider. First, AML requirements. There are AML rules in Colombia that expressly states that any entity that wants to engage in crypto asset services or products, and any company that meets the volumetry thresholds that are described by such regulation, they will need to be to implement and approve an AML system called SagriLaft. Second, they need to comply with foreign exchange regulations. So any transaction that involves an FX transaction regarding crypto assets will need to be registered, to be reported to the central bank. So even when using crypto assets, if the underlying transaction corresponds to any controlled transaction that needs to be reported to the central bank, it must be conducted through the foreign exchange market, that is, through a compensation account or through a foreign exchange market or an IMC, which is the acronym of the intermediary here in Colombia. And finally, in Colombia, we have something that is called massive collection of funds, which is something that can only be made by a financial entity. So any crypto asset company must guarantee that their activities and their crypto asset services do not mean by any means massive collection of funds from the public. So that would be the general landscape on Colombia and some of the challenges that any crypto asset company or service provider that wants to engage in their activities in Colombia should have in mind or consider before entering into the market. So, thank you all.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for the very detailed and complete overview of the regulatory landscape in Colombia. So for the final part of our webinar, before our Q&A, I will give the floor to Juan Carlos Ollivier from Creel in Mexico. So thank you very much for your participation, Juan Carlos, and please give us an overview of the regulatory landscape of digital assets in Mexico. Thank you very much.
Of course, and hello everyone. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure being with you today. And thank you very much, Pedro, for this invitation, and thank you all for your participation in this webinar. Well, moving on to the topic, in Mexico, it was not until the enactment of the FinTech law back in 2018 when a legal precept defines for the first time what a virtual asset is. And the law defines virtual asset as the representation of value registered electronically and used by the public as means of payment for all types of legal acts, which can only be transferred through electronic means. There is no other definition of what a virtual asset, crypto, or digital asset is in any other regulation in Mexico, but in the FinTech law. On the other hand, Banco de Mexico, which is Mexico's central bank, was delegated with the authority, and this delegation was in terms of the FinTech law. So it was delegated with the authority to issue specific regulations on the subject. In this sense, according to the FinTech law, only those virtual assets determined by Banco de Mexico will be able to operate, and it will be Banco de Mexico who defines the characteristics of the operations in the secondary in this secondary regulation. So just please note that the FinTech law only authorizes banks and financial technology institutions, which are those known as e-wallets and crowdfunding entities, to carry out transactions with virtual assets. Therefore, other financial entities are not authorized to enter into such transactions. So, generally speaking, the FinTech law, what they did was regulate the virtual assets, but only for financial entities. So only banks and these financial technology institutions will be allowed, in principle, to operate with virtual assets or crypto digital assets. No other financial entities, such as, for example, brokerage houses or mutual funds, may be able to operate with this type of assets. So, and in addition, the central bank considers it convenient to maintain a safe, or as they say, healthy distance between virtual assets and the financial system due to several factors. But at the end, central bank and in general the Mexican financial authorities do not want to mix the world of the virtual assets with the regulated financial system. Therefore, the secondary regulation issued by Banco de Mexico establishes that banks and, again, these financial technology institutions, e-wallets and crowdfundings, may only use virtual assets with the prior authorization from the Mexican Central Bank. And this is only for internal operations, defined as those operations that said institutions carry out internally to perform passive, active, and service operations with their clients, or that they carry out for their own account, including the activities performed by such institutions to support the internal transfer of funds. So these internal operations are just those intended to be performed in order to provide their services. Likewise, by means of the adjoint statement, the financial authorities have pronounced on the matter, arguing that financial institutions are not authorized to enter into or offer to the public operations with virtual assets or crypto in general, including deposits or any other form of custody, as well as exchange or transmission. So no financial entities in Mexico are allowed to operate with their clients with virtual assets or crypto in general. It is also considered that holding of stable coins on behalf of clients is compared to engaging in fundraising activities. Therefore, those who issue or offer such instruments within Mexican territory will be liable for the breaches to the regulation that this may cause and will be subject to applicable sanctions. So they compare the holding of stable coins to, let's say, deposit-taking activities, which is a heavily regulated activity here in Mexico, which only a few financial entities may perform, such as banks and e-wallets, for example. In contrast, the fintech provisions only regulate transactions with virtual assets carried out by financial entities. However, they do not restrict the ability of non-financial individuals or entities to offer services with virtual assets and carry out transactions with that type of assets, right? So, in other words, the general provisions in Mexico do not prohibit or limit any person with contractual capacity, including companies, other than banks and financial technology institutions, from carrying out transactions with virtual assets, including the purchase, sale, custody, or transfer. Nor do they limit the ability of such persons to keep the ownership of this type of assets. In this sense, virtual assets may be freely acquired by any person other than financial institutions, subject to the risk they decide, this specific person, decide to assume by carrying out such transactions, under the acknowledgement that such virtual assets are not backed by any financial institution. However, such non-financial entities are subject to the federal law for the prevention and identification of transactions with illicit proceeds, that is, the anti-money laundering law, which establishes obligations regarding the prevention of money laundering and financing of terrorism in this type of activities. So it is considered carrying out crypto transactions. It is considered a vulnerable activity. It is defined as the regular and professional exchange of virtual assets by parties other than financial entities, carried out through electronic, digital, or similar platforms, the management or operate facilitating or carrying out purchase or sale transactions of such assets owned by their clients or provide means of custody, storage, or transfer of virtual assets other than those recognized by Banco de Mexico. So in general, or generally speaking, any type of transaction with virtual assets will be considered as vulnerable activity for purposes of the anti-money laundering law. Finally, considering the wide diversity of virtual assets that may be available, some of which we are not even aware of, it is important to review each specific case to make sure that there are no regulations that may breach as a result of the operation of a certain type of virtual asset. I mean, that is, since there is no specific regulation on virtual assets, anyone who performs this kind of activities should be mindful of not breaching other regulation when performing these activities. And to give you an example, in the case of an ICO or an initial coin offering with respect to an NFT, for example, that has as underlying shares of a company's capital stock, could involve or could be considered or construed by the authorities as public offering of securities within Mexican territory, an activity that is regulated by the securities market law and which requires a specific procedure and authorization to be carried out. This is the current regulatory situation or landscape of the digital assets in Mexico so far. And thank you very much, Pedro.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Well, we had today, fortunately, a very big audience that followed us in our event, so we received a lot of questions. However, I would like to keep the event around 1 hour, and also to in respect of the agenda of our panelists. So I will send over the questions to the panelists. I'll just ask a final question to all the panelists. We can follow the same order that we kept in the presentations. So what you would say as a suggestion for a foreign investor that intends to invest in your country? What would be your tips, suggestions, and cautions? Of course, I'd like to say that the Central Bank of Brazil has been doing a very wonderful job in fostering competition and fostering new projects in the country. And of course, it's needless to say that apart from searching for the advice of the specialists that we have today with us. So I'd like to start with Danielle, and then we can follow the same order that we kept in the presentations. And after that, we can finish our webinar. So Daniel, please.
Okay. If I have to give my comment to a potential foreign investor, foreign player that wants or is wondering whether to do business with digital assets in Argentina, I would say that the is good for investments, and the regulation that we have, and even the enhanced rule that is under public consultation, I think are aligned with international standards, and it's not a very heavy regime. It tries to put some, rules and limitations and clarifications, but they do not hinder innovation. But of course, I mean, if these players decide to enter into these regimes, I mean, they will need to pay attention to compliance and to reportings, etc. So some sort of local structure they will need to have. It will not be possible to, manage the business fully from abroad. And apart from that, I think Argentina is right now welcoming investments, so it's a good moment to come and invest.
Thank you, Daniel. Fabio, please.
Okay, Pedro. From the Brazilian perspective, we are quite inviting of all stakeholders abroad to consider what the technology of digital assets can do in the financial sector. We are looking beyond what happens with crypto itself. Crypto is a very promising, and we are also open to that, but that's just part of what can be done with this technology. And I think that the natural interoperability that happens with this technology across different jurisdictions is a point that calls the attention of all central banks, and we need to provide a system or a framework that is safe for investors, for all the stakeholders, and that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to keep this process as transparent as possible, because we think that that's the best way to move forward, to keep everybody on the same page and the discussions open to the society.
Thank you, Fabio. Josefina, please.
So in attention to suggestions for foreign investors in any business with regards to digital assets in Chile, I'd say that the perspective for investment in Chile is quite well guarded. Particularly the fintech law that is in the process of implementation provides for a leveled playing field for the different actors in the system, as well as provides insurance for investors and companies themselves for the regulatory aspects that will be sought from them by the different authorities. Additionally, it promotes competition. It provides the ability for companies to participate in the system within certain parameters that are comparable to those of international standards. So I'd say the main suggestion would be to, prior to starting the business in Chile, review the different aspects which would affect the company, say the service that they would be providing, so that compliance with the different regulations and registration requirements is achieved within the scope of the law.
Thank you, Josefina. Jorge, please.
So what I would say to any potential investor in the cryptocurrencies or crypto assets market in Colombia is that it is a market that is growing in a very exponential manner. And I would say that they would have to consider three things. First, it is important for them to collaborate with local entities, such as financial entities, fintech companies, or even government agencies. And this could create a very supportive crypto ecosystem for it to continue growing, and for them to be able to do the other two things. First, to create a general or an educated view of any person who wants to invest in cryptocurrencies, and to raise awareness about their benefits. And second, I think they should focus on how their services help with financial inclusion, which it's something that has been taken very importantly here in Colombia, and would definitely contribute to the economic growth of this ecosystem.
Thank you, Jorge. And finally, Juan Carlos.
Yes, thank you, Pedro. Well, my recommendation is first to define exactly the scope of services you will intend to offer within Mexican territory, and of course to get advice not only on a regulatory perspective, but also, for example, a tax perspective. As I mentioned, non-financial companies or entities are are not prohibited from carrying out this type of services. But in the absence of a specific regulation, it is certainly necessary to ensure that in the performance of these transactions, other legal provisions are not breached, just as the one I mentioned related to public offering of securities in Mexico. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. So, as a general takeaway of this event, we have a general overview of a very positive regulatory landscapes in these 5 jurisdictions that we discussed today. So, digital assets have a very huge potential to foster the economy. So, at least from the perspective of these 5 jurisdictions, Latin America is welcoming investments from abroad. So with this, we finish our event today. I'd like to, on behalf of Eroles Advogados, to thank all our panelists, Danielle, Jorge, Josefina, Fabio, Juan Carlos, to thank all our audience, to thank all Regina Pedroso from ABTOKEN for the joint initiative, and to mention that the event today has been recorded and will be available in the channel of the firm at YouTube. So thank you very much for your participation, and see you in the next opportunity. Thank you very much.